Jerry Hestand has been researching Bigfoot for many, many years and has an interest in this since he was a child. And his #1 place and favorite place to research has always been Fouke, Arkansas. He's interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. He's written a fantastic book about the subject of his investigations and his interest in the Bigfoot field. He's going to be bringing you a brand new, interesting presentation today. Please welcome Jerry Hestand.
Thank you, Lyle. Thank you, Lyle. Oh boy, Fouke, Arkansas. Good to be here. Good to see everybody. See some familiar faces in the crowd, and I always say a bad day in Fouke's better than a good day at work, and I've never had a bad day in Fouke, so this is the place. I got a lot to say today. I got to talk fast and show fast because I got a lot of slides, so pay attention because there will be a test later. Bob mentioned I was on the Monster Quest episode, and if you watch it, just remember it wasn't my idea to do a bunch of the goofy stuff they asked me to do. So that's me in Mercer Bayou. I'm all camoed up with my camera and all of that stuff, and that's my website. But we've always thought that's the way to go, you know, if you want to find one of these things, get camoed up, sit covered, and then be real quiet. You can't hardly get much quieter than in a kayak. Let's see if I can get this thing to work. There we go, there's my website. If you go to my website, go over here to this part right here, and that's where all the videos and pictures and stuff like that of the Fouke Monster investigations and things like that. So a lot of people miss that. I wrote a book back in 2017. They're for sale. I've got a limited edition back there if you're interested. I investigated Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, and I tell stories of all of those and kind of an evolution of me as a Bigfoot researcher, you know, how I got started. And be sure to drop by and say hello to my beautiful helper there. Chapter 12 of my book, I talk about conferences, and I helped Craig kind of get started in 2001. I've been to a lot of conferences, and I've got my own idea about Bigfoot conferences. And just a real quick rundown of the history of what I've done. Chapter 3, I talk about the TBRC, how Craig started it, and it eventually evolved into a nonprofit organization. And now we have citizen scientists like us and a lot of you that go out in the woods, and we don't have PhDs or anything, but we're looking for certain things and certain evidence. And now we have a lot of professional scientists. Matter of fact, just this year, I think we had 4 people with PhDs in various fields such as DNA and wildlife biology. We got one guy, all he does is look at the sounds that we record, like 24/7, 365 days a year. We record sounds, and we've got people that do that. So we're doing pretty good. That's the name of the group now. Wood8.org. We call them Wood Apes probably from now on. I'll call them apes because it's just more descriptive for me and it's just a little bit different. Our friend Seth Bradelove made a series of DVDs called On the Trail of Bigfoot, and episode 5 is about Area X, place where we research. And if you want to know really, really what I do, that's the one to watch, episode 5. And I think it's free on YouTube. As I started putting this presentation together, I thought, you know, small towns all have a story all across the country. All the investigations I've done, I've gone to small towns, and it seems like a lot of people knew about the Bigfoot type creature that was around their area, but they didn't want to talk about it. And a small town, the littlest one's 2,500, it says, so Fouke is really, really, really little. So it is a small town. So you go to these places and you try to talk to somebody. There's usually somebody that sent in a report, and you talk to them, and they'll say, well, you need to go talk to my cousin or my brother. And Lyle and I were talking yesterday, you'll always run into somebody say, oh, I've lived around here all my life. I've hunted and fished, and I ain't never seen no monster. And you talk to them, you talk to them, you talk to them for a while, and eventually they say, but my uncle now, my uncle, he was hunting one time, and he thought he saw something. So little towns, that's where you get your information. That's where we go. Even little town I lived in when I was a kid growing up, there was a giant snake living out in the rock pit. This guy was fishing, and he said he saw a big telephone pole going through the water, and it started slithering and went up the bank. And a couple of Sundays later, on the front page of the newspaper, there was this old farmer squatted down by the impression of his tractor tire about this wide, and he said he saw a snake that filled in the tractor tire imprint, and said it raised up nearly as tall as he was, you know, and looked at him. So whether that was real or not, I don't know. But every little town has a story, just like Fouke. And a friend of mine, Mike Mays, found this book, and I was just shocked at all the little towns in Texas that have ghosts or UFOs or Bigfoot or big cats or something dating way, way back to present day. And then, of course, the legend of Boggy Creek. That's what got me started pretty much as a teenager. And I always ask, and if I do a tour later, I'm going to ask how many people have seen the movie. So please, a show of hands, how many people have seen the movie? Oh, good. Hallelujah. I won't have to repeat myself, but it's shocking. I'll do these tours, and I'll say, how many people have seen the movie? And 2 or 3 people, and nobody's seen it, and I'm thinking, why are you here then? You know? And Pam Pierce, Charles Pierce's daughter, found the old movie in the can. Lyle helped her, and there was 1 copy left. 1 copy left. And they took it and had it reworked into Blu-ray. And guys, stick around for the movie tonight because it's incredible. The detail is just incredible. I just can't say enough. So, going into kind of what I'm talking about, the scientific part of it and all the rivers and lakes that run into this area, is there anything that we can prove? Anything we can say it's an icon, but can we prove the existence? In chapter 14, I talk about the Fouke Monster and the Monster Mart. When I came here in 2001, it was just an old gas station. And that was it. There was one old faded newspaper article, kind of yellowed over in the corner, and that was it. And now look at it. I mean, it's gone crazy, and I never thought that I'd write a book and have my poster and book, and you know, kind of riding on Lyle's coattails. You know, he's got his books and T-shirts and stuff in there. I never thought it would evolve into this. So this is where my heart's at. So basically, I'm going to talk a little bit about the rivers and things that run into this area. And these are some of the rivers. You can't see a lot of detail, but all of these rivers run into the areas north of here or south of here or very close to here. So I'm thinking this may be a hub of where the apes live. You know, this is where they get together. And this is just Texas. If you look at Oklahoma, there's some more rivers, and they all flow into Little River County, which is right north of here. And this is Miller County, Little River County. I've done some investigations here, and all along these rivers in North Texas and Southern Oklahoma have reports on them. When I first joined, they said, Jerry, you live in North Texas. Why don't you do the reports from North Texas and Southern Oklahoma, which I did. And they said, well, since you're doing that, why don't you go ahead and cover Miller County, Arkansas? I said, yes, yes. That's where Fouke is. So I was so excited. And just to give you a little description about the size of the area, you can read it again. You can drive south of here on Highway 75 and find the Sulphur River Wildlife Management Area. And the Sulphur River, near where I live, north of Dallas, is 175 miles long, which is long. And it's a lot of bottomland, and there's not many people that live there. And in these bottomlands, there's nobody there. Then that's Mercer Bayou picture. A friend and I flew over it kind of like in the beginning of the movie, and we were just shocked. We got to Caddo Lake, if you know where that is, and we just flew, and you couldn't see nothing but trees and creeks and stuff like that. And, you know, there's the Red River and White Oak Creek, which I'm going to talk about today. Not many people. So that's what it looks from an airplane, and that's what it looks like at night down in the bayou. And that is my favorite place on the planet to be, and the favorite time to be there, because at night when the sun's going down and you're creeping down through there real quiet, you're thinking, you know, what if I see one, or what if I hear one, and then a big old bunch of wild hogs will you go, oh! But it's a lot of fun, and you're going along and you see red eyes shine, you know it's gators, and it's just kind of fun, but it's not really safe, so I don't know how much more I want to do. This is a satellite picture of the wildlife management area, and you can see how immense it is. Over here on the left is the 2-lane blacktop where Smith Park is located, and it's a pretty good place to camp at because it's free. And over here is Fouke, Arkansas. But if you spend the night at Smith Park and you want to go to Fouke, you got to drive way down south and come back up to Fouke, or you got to drive way north and come back down, because there's no cutting through this wilderness. There's nothing out there. Nothing out there. Here's a good quote I found, and I thought I'd include it. It made me think about when I first saw the movie. As evidence piles up on evidence, certain bodies of knowledge do gain universal acceptance. They ascend a scale of credibility from interesting to suggestive to persuasive and finally compelling. And that's the way I felt when I first saw The Legend of Boggy Creek. I thought, oh, this is cool. And by the time it finished, I said, when I get old enough to drive, I'm going to be a Bigfoot researcher if it kills me. And then he says, and given enough time, it's obvious. Well, it's obvious, isn't it? That there is something around here. Something. We don't know what, for sure. But obviously, there's something around here. And that was an ecologist by the name of V.O. Wilson. And that was posted on the NAWAC forum by my friend David Cotter. He's a real good investigator. Here's a picture of David. He's kind of a weird duck. No, I get you. That's Carl Linnaeus. He's the father of modern taxonomy. We all know that animals have to be in a class, order, family, genus, species, subspecies. Your cat's a member of the tigers. Your dogs goes along with the wolves, and we all know that. It's a fact. And he knew that. He said, if you want to prove an animal, you're going to have to get it, dissect it, look at its internal organs, its muscle structure, its skeletal structure, and everything. And if it's a new animal, you'll know it. If it matches some others, then it's in a certain species. So I spoke to Murray County College, some college students, and I said, you can get your little brother or little sister's alphabet book that has all the animals A to Z, and somebody, somewhere, sometime, found an aardvark, and they took it and said, this is weird. They took it to a dissection table, cut it apart, looked at its environment, and said, okay, this is a new species. And all the way to zebra. Well, this zebra looks like a horse, probably in the horse family. Yeah, probably. So they take it apart, they dissect it, they look at it, and they say, yes, it is a member of the horse family. But wait a minute, there's another zebra over here that looks a little different. Is it really a zebra? Well, they go through the process, and they say, yes, it's a zebra. But what if you went to Australia a couple of hundred years ago and you saw a kangaroo? Say, look at that big old rabbit. Man, oh man, that's going to be some good eating tonight. Well, let's see what it is. So they get a specimen, they dissect it and look at it. They said, oh no, this is not in the rabbit family at all. Well, look at the little baby one. Well, let's get a specimen. They take it and they examine it closely, and they said, no, it's not a kangaroo, it's a wallaby. So you see what I'm getting at. If you want to scientifically prove it, you've got to go to a lot of effort. Native Americans knew that they were real, and I'm not really going to get into it, but what's cool about it is every major Native American group in North America have a name for Bigfoot. And how can Native Americans in Washington State have a name, and then the ones in Florida have a name? I don't think it's a coincidence. I think these animals lived in proliferance back before the Anglos arrived. If you go in the woods, take some protection, and I don't care what it is. Take some bear spray, or a big old baseball bat with nails in it or something. But our organization, we require that you have a gun permit. You go through the training and get a handgun permit. You also go through the training to get a safety certificate for a long gun, and we have a lot of training on safety. So here's my wife. She's qualifying for her permit. And over on the top, there's my buddy Ken. He's got a 500 mag handgun, and you can see the fire coming out of it. And that would definitely hurt something. I tell you what, it put a hole in it. But still, you know, I've talked to people that have had to deal with gorillas, and they said a mountain gorilla, you better have some heavy ammo. And this is kind of sad, but they had to kill a gorilla once. And they had a big old elephant gun. And it was coming towards them, and they shot it in the chest and knocked it down. But it got up, and I'm talking like a 45-70 type gun. It got up and kept coming towards them. Well, some people had some SKSs there, and they shot it, and it went down, and it got up again. So finally, somebody had to sneak around the back with the shotgun with slugs in it and shot it in the back and killed it. And that's sad. That's sad that happened. But if I were you, I would not shoot one of these 8s. I would not shoot it unless you've got a huge gun and you've got a kill shot. So I'm just saying, for your own protection, take something in the woods with you. And for me, it's just mainly for people. You know what I'm saying? I'm not scared of the bears and the mountain lions particularly. I'm scared of the people. Here's a story that was on our forum last week up in Norman. There was this bear up in the tree, and they tried to tranquilize it. So they shot it with a tranquilizer gun, and it took an hour, and nothing happened. And it just sat up in there. So they finally had to shoot it and kill it, which is sad. But people say, well, why don't you just tranquilize one? Well, we talked about that in 2001. I had a friend, Gino Napoli. He knew a veterinarian, and the veterinarian said, yeah, I got tranquilizer guns, I've got darts, but we need to know what kind of medicine you're going to use to shoot one of these things. If you use too much, it's going to kill it right away. If you don't use enough, it's just going to walk off. So that's the dilemma. Number one, you got to get close enough, and I don't want to get close if I have to one of these animals. And number two, how much medicine are you going to put in the tranquilizer? If it's too much, you're going to kill it right off the bat. Or if you don't kill it, it's going to wander off into the woods or take you and use you as a baseball bat and bang you up against a tree. So I don't want to make a 8 mad. I'm just going to skip the tranquilizer part. When you go in the woods, and I hate to be telling anybody, investigators in here, or want to be investigators. See some hands there in the back. Guys, if you go out in the woods, even just for the fun of it, get a cheap GPS. They're only like, this one's like $60, and you never know. I mean, you just never know. You go on a trail, you see something cool, you get off the trail, and then if it's a cloudy day or it's getting dark, you can get lost in a hurry. And a couple of times I've been in some bad situations and got lost. So I always carry a GPS. And I've been way out in the woods with friends. They said, okay, let's head back. Which way did we go? And they'll take off this way and they'll take off that way. And I'll say, hold on a minute. And I'll click on my GPS and say, well, we go in that direction for 2.5 miles straight in that direction. Oh, that thing don't work. I don't need that. I've been in these woods all my life. Okay, whatever you say. So that's one thing I would use. If you're going to get a headlamp, spend some money. The technology has gotten so much better. This is a Petzl. It's like $35. The cheap Walmart ones just don't quite cut it. Just go ahead and spend the money and get a good headlamp. And if you're going on a day trip, throw some kind of light in your backpack, because you never know, that daytime trip or that evening trip may turn into a night trip, which has happened to me. It's like, uh-oh, here we are out in the middle of the woods, and it's dark, and we don't have a light. Get you a good strong flashlight, and look at the lumens. Don't look at the wattage or any of that, look at the lumens. And I've got a really bright light that I use, you know, it's a backup, and don't go cheap on that either. Don't buy cheap look at the lumens and get a good light. And then a lot of people use a FLIR, and I don't have the money for that right now. But Lyle's got one, a bunch of my fellow investigators have them. They're thermal imaging devices, and it takes the guesswork out. Back in the day, we'd walk around and say, "Ooh, what's that sound? I don't know, it's in the bushes. I can't see anything." Well, if you got one of these, it takes the guesswork out. You know what's in the bushes. I take a portable camera with me. I take the camera case, I have a headband that I can use, I get 2 batteries and a portable charger. I've got a good card in my camera, and I can spend all day recording everything I see. And the battery runs dead, I just change the batteries. If the card gets full, I just format it and keep going. So that's something I would suggest, because we got all these pictures and, you know, I don't know. You want a good video. And here you can make a mount on your dash. It says recent sighting area. Lyle and I were riding around. I think we found this area yesterday, but inevitably we go to the Monster Mart and there'll be somebody come in and say, "I came from Canada just to be here in Fouke, Arkansas." Believe it or not, and I mean believe it or not, last week we looked in the book and there were some people that came from Tokyo just to come to Fouke, Arkansas. And the Denny keeps a register of that, and it just goes on and on and on. Every country that you can think of, there have been people come to Fouke just because of the Fouke monster. But you can mount your camera on your dash. Lyle and I were in the Monster Mart last year, and this guy said, "Hey, you guys are into this Fouke monster thing?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, a relative of mine lives in Jonesville, and he pulled over, something was wrong with his car, and he was fiddling with it, and his young daughter started screaming. And he said, 'What's wrong?' She said, 'Daddy, Daddy, there's a monkey man out in the woods.'" And he turned around and looked, and sure enough, there was a monkey man right there on the edge of the woods looking at him. So we went out there and looked around. Naturally, it still wasn't there, but mount your camera. Mount your camera on your car windshield, drive around the back roads of Fouke, and you never know what might come up. Recent sightings. A lot of people say, "Well, this happened in 1972. No, no, no. Every year, there's people reporting to Lyle about their encounters and sightings of the Fouke monster. This guy, if you go on the tour today, we'll talk about him, but this guy invited us out to his property, and he said, "My grandfather saw it when he was plowing one day. He felt kind of weird, and he turned the tractor off, and he looked over in the woods where Boggy Creek runs through. There was this big old black hairy monster staring at him. And the thing realized the tractor had stopped, so it turned around and went in the woods." And this guy said one afternoon, a big storm rolled up, it was getting dark, he was tired, and he thought, "Well, I'm just going to go in the back bedroom and lay down and rest." And he was laying in his bed looking out the window, big flashes of lightning, loud thunder. And as he looked out in the backyard, he seen something moving down the barbed wire fence towards him. And finally, a big bolt of lightning flew up and just light everywhere. And he saw one of these creatures looking at him. And he realized, and the monster realized, he was looking at the monster, and the monster was looking at him, and it took off. So, wow, his nap was over for that day, wasn't it? But his family has just had a history of seeing these things on their property. A lot of Boggy Creek runs through his property. Here's a quote that I'm going to read it to you. It's from my friend Alton Higgins. He's a member of the NAWAC, and it talks about what you might expect if you see one of these things, because there for 2 or 3 years in the area that we researched, it was just crazy. They were coming in every week, and you had to be there. That's all I got to say. And you might not believe some of it, but some people had some traumatic experiences. Some big, burly, tough guys got up and left in the middle of the night. Some big, burly guys stayed 2 or 3 days and said, I'm done. I can't take it anymore. So you never know what's going to happen if you see one. You might say, oh boy, that's great. I've always wanted to see one. I won the lottery, which is true. Or you might say, oh, that's kind of scary. I'm going to get in the car and drive off. Or you may just totally freak out. So Alton said, as the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for. If you've listened to very many of the NAWAC podcasts, which is likely the case, you've doubtless heard how experiencing events in Area X can sometimes be traumatic, and that's what we call our research area, Area X. And like I said, a lot of people have been freaked out. Honestly, there's no way to predict how any one person will react in a given situation. All I want to do right now is hopefully help the new members to make a sober assessment of what resides in that valley where Camp David sits, and that's the name of our cabin. Adult wood apes are large, shockingly large. Try to prepare your minds for that reality. So if you decide to be a researcher and you run into one, just be prepared. Something might happen. And the one I saw was shockingly large. I couldn't believe it. Old saying, go in deep, stay a week, they will come to you. Well, that's partially true. You don't have to go in deep. You can drive around the back roads and have just as much luck as me going way back in Mercer Bayou. But if you find a place that's legitimate, like Fouke, Arkansas, or the Ouachita Mountains in Oklahoma, or the Big Thicket in South Texas, and these shows you see on TV where they spend a night or two, no. If you want to have an encounter, you need to stay several nights, maybe even a week, and they will come to you. Well, if you're in their area and they don't want you there, they will come to you and let you know they don't want you there. And if you stay a week and nothing happens, well, there's none of the ground, and that's just the way it is because they're real animals. They don't just appear when the when the night comes. Here's a good story I just heard about, and I'll try to make it short. There was a Siberian researcher named Suyong Park, and over a period of 10 years, tigers found 23 of his game cameras and destroyed them even after being covered with deer scent. The act of destruction was never caught on tape because the cameras were always destroyed from the back. They have to be lucky every day. We only have to be lucky once. So how could a tiger know that this thing was a danger to it and it shouldn't get in front of it and ought to tear it apart from the back? I don't know. And this guy's hard case. He lived in the woods for 10 years. He dug out a hole in the side of a mountain and lived in a hole in the mountain for 10 years. Am I that hardcore and ready to do that? No. But he did it. His friends would bring him food, and he would stay there. And it took him 10 years to get a picture of a Siberian tiger and see his first one. That's dedication, folks. Well, here's a quick story. I'll try to make it fast. In Area X, we had a camera in the creek, and it kept getting turned around. Something would get from behind it and just turn it and move it, and we could never see what was doing it. Usually if a bear or say a raccoon gets on your game camera, they'll give themselves away. You'll eventually see a paw or a nose or part of an ear come around the front. But whatever this was, we could never see it. So me and 2 other researchers got another camera and got up above the creek, and we tightened another game camera down really tight on this post. And it was looking down at the camera in the creek that was getting moved. I said, okay, we got it now. You can't move this camera. Well, we came back about 4 days later, and guess what? We pulled the card out, and that game camera had been turned and moved upside down and all around, and we're thinking, there's no way. This is getting into the paranormal, There's no way. So, finally, we got another camera, and there was this old abandoned trailer right next to this post, so we bolted a camera up on top of this old abandoned trailer, looking at the camera on the post that's looking at the camera in the creek. Well, guess what? We pulled that card and looked at it, and the darn thing had been turned and twisted and moved around, and you couldn't see a paw or a snout or anything. So I don't know. I'm just saying, I don't know. There's just some things that are beyond me. And there's a picture of the book, Great Soul in Siberia. I haven't read it, but we're citizen scientists. This guy was a scientist. He's hardcore, very hardcore. Here's the picture, and I'm kind of getting into the middle of my program, and I hope I started my timer to see how much time I've got or how much time I've used up, because it's going to take me a full hour to do this thing. But going from north central Texas, north of Dallas, there's a series of lakes and creeks that come to Fouke, Arkansas, and this is some of them. And we've had reports from not all, but nearly all of these lakes. And there's Caddo Lake circled in red. Oops. Cooper Lake is where we started, and in chapter 6, I think, I talk about how we started, what we saw. And Cooper Lake's a nice lake, just a regular lake like any lake you see, except when you go back behind the dam, it looks like this. That shockingly looks like the Mercer Bayou, doesn't it? Very much like. And for miles and miles and miles near north of Commerce, all the way to here, it looks, the Sulphur River looks like that. Now, not all of it. There's places where it's just big flat rock, but there's tons and tons of habitat for these animals to move from central North Texas to Fouke, Arkansas. And I said I had an update. People had an encounter 2 years ago. They were just fishing and said, we got to let you know that there's a family lives there. They let the family know that we saw one of these things. You know, we can't explain it. We were down by the edge of the lake getting ready to leave. We were fishing, and it just come out and bent down and started drinking the lake water. And we don't know what to tell you, just thought you ought to know. White Oak Creek. Nobody ever hears of White Oak Creek. This is the first time this story's ever been told. We always had members join, hopefully young members, and we had a young man join, and he said, I want to be in your group because I had an encounter when I was young. Oh yeah? Where were you at? He said, well, our family lived in the White Oak Bottomlands, and he was like my friend Smokey Crabtree. He could leave the house for a week at a time, and his parents wouldn't worry about him because he was going out to hunt to find some food to put on the table. And that's just the way it was back in the day. My friend Smokey would go out and noodle, if you know what noodle means. He'd go out and noodle catfish so they'd have something to eat. He would go to the store and buy one bullet because that's all he could afford. And he would hope that his dog would chase down a rabbit for the family to eat. But if his dog couldn't chase something down, he'd have to waste a bullet and kill something. So anyway, this young man was with his mule and his dog, and he went out in the bottomlands, and he spent 3 or 4 days, killed a deer, was bringing it back, and everything was cool until he heard something following him. And he would stop, and whatever was following him would stop. And he'd take back off, and whatever it was following him would take back off. So finally, the dog got skittish and started running back towards whatever was making the sound, and all of a sudden, soon, whoosh, that dog was done. He said, I'm going home. So it ran to the house. And he thought, well, this is fine. I'm going to go up to the house, and we have a big, huge field that's wide open. So if whatever it is brave enough to follow me out in that open field, I'll know what it is. So he got about 50 yards out into the middle of the field, and he looked back, and there was this huge black stump on the edge of the wood line. Had a real pointed head, no neck at all, just black. And then it stood up. And it said it was coal black, huge animal, pointed skull, and it just stood up and looked at him. And it acted like it wanted to get out in the pasture, but it knew it shouldn't, so it turned around and left. And he said, ever since then, I wanted to see another one. And I'll talk about him a little more later on.
A quick announcement.
Yeah.
So anyone who signed up for the 11 o'clock tour needs to go ahead and get ready and meet up outside for the van. So if you're a part of the 11 o'clock tour, go ahead and get ready to meet up outside for that. Thank you.
Okay, so that interruption gives me an extra 15 minutes. Good. So we're moving from White Oak Creek to Jefferson, Texas, which isn't that far from here, and I'll try to make this one quick. Family called this guy named Big John. He said, there's something weird going on, and he told a fellow member of his church that he think there was a Bigfoot on his property. His property was where Big Cypress and Little Cypress and Black Cypress all came together out by Jefferson, Texas. And he said, I went to my chicken coop one morning and all 28 chickens were gone. No feathers, no nothing. I don't know what happened. And we know how chicken coops are. Raccoons and rats and everything can get in. But something got all 28 of my chickens at one time. His wife had to unlock a gate about a mile away to get to the property. And she got out of the truck to unlock the gate. She had a terrible smell come up on her. And she thought, oh my God, there's something dead here. And she got kind of a creepy feeling. But she went in and locked the gate and come back and said, I think there's some weird animal, maybe a bear or something down by the gate. And the next day she left and the smell was gone, so it wasn't anything dead. About the same time, there were some people fishing on the bayou, not too far from his house. And late at night, an animal came up on the right side of them and another one came up on the left side. And it started growling at them and shaking the leaves. And they got the heck out of there. And like I said, if you're somewhere that these things don't want you to be, they're going to do everything to scare you away. So that happened. And let's see. Oh yeah, here's the good part. He lived way out in the woods, in this bayou country. And he had one security light in front of his house. Well, he noticed he raised these small Hereford cattle. I don't know what they are. They're not full size. They're smaller Herefords. He had about 11 of them, and all of them at night would come and get up underneath this security light. Well, that's weird. They ought to be out grazing, you know, that's crazy. And he had this huge dog. I was scared to get out of the car. It's so big. It's about that big. Is it a Pyrenees? Is that what they're called? Pyrenees? Oh my God, scary dog. He said, that dog will tear you up, you know, if I don't tell him to be cool. So he looked out there, and the Pyrenees was underneath the security light. He said, man, something weird's going on here. So he kept an eye on it. And finally, one night he just happened to get up and he looked outside and there was a doe sitting in the middle of the cattle with the dog just kind of looking around. He thought, now that just don't make any sense. And he kind of opened the screen door and it squeaked and the deer heard him and it jumped and ran towards the swamp, jumped over the barbed wire fence and took off through the swamp. About 30 seconds later, here come that deer running back, jumped over the barbed wire fence and got right back in the middle of the cattle. So there was 4 of us was sent out to investigate this. One of them was the young man I told you about, White Oak Creek, and there's the chicken coop. And he bought some more chickens and they disappeared. So I don't know. He thinks it was an egg. This is my friend Charles DeVore, chapter 15. I talked about the Caddo Lake area, and he had something similar happen to him. He came to one of our conferences like this and said, you the Bigfoot people, I live in Karnak. I think I've had some experiences with Bigfoot. I get up early in the morning, like 4:30, and paddle out on what I call my bayou. And one morning I heard a scream and a yell off to the left of me, and it was a narrow spot. And he said, oh crud, I bet that's a wild dog, because people would dump their dogs out and they would get in a pack. And he said, if that's a wild dog, I better get my gun out. But just as soon as it screamed and yelled, there was an answer from the right side of him, the exact scream and yell. And he didn't hang around and he left, but as you see, there's a pattern there. They didn't want him there for some reason. But anyway, as part of the team, Charles and I went out in our kayaks late at night on Black Bayou, and totally dark. I had a camera, like at the beginning of the presentation, had a big IR lens on it, and I could see anything on the bayou or on the side. So we paddled down, and I had this vocalization that I downloaded from the internet that I was going to play, really loud. So I played it, and boom, an instant response. And Charles and I thought, oh my God, you know, this is the real deal. So I was looking around with my camera and I couldn't see anything, so I played it again, and it answered again. And it was back towards where the lady had the gate. And we thought, oh man, this is a gold mine. If we'll just stick it out. So we sat there and sat there and sat there, and nothing happened. We said, well, we might as well pack it in. You know, we've been busted. It knows it's people or it's not one of its own kind. So we went back, got the tents. The young man that I told you about from White Oak Creek, he was in a tent. He said about 3 in the morning, there was an ungodly howl that came from the swamp where we were. He said it sounded like the Ohio howl. If any of y'all know what the Ohio howl sounds like. And he said it sounded like it was coming towards the house. So he got out of his tent and got in his truck with his shotgun and locked the door and stayed awake all night. But we spent 2 or 3 days. That was the end of it. Lost touch with Big John. So I think there was probably an animal or animals that were moving through this area, and they seen the opportunity to eat some chickens. Swamp ate versus wood ate. About 20 miles as the crow flies from Big John's place, there was a boy that was running out through the woods one day getting ready to have a camp out, and he crossed through this highline wire area, all open, and he heard something crashing through the brush. He said, I bet that's a big buck. You know, I want to see if this is a big buck, maybe a trophy buck or something. And he kind of squatted down and he saw this big animal running through the brush towards the open spot where he was at. And as he looked, it was a huge ape running all fours. And as it got to the open area, there was the post. And as it was running all fours, it grabbed that post and just stood up like that. And there was my friend 15 feet away. And they just kind of stared at each other. And he was going... And he had somebody that was a real good artist recreate what the animal looked like that he saw. And on the left, that is the picture of my friend's ape that he saw. So he knew, and he's a member of our group. On the right, that's just an orangutan in a swamp somewhere, and I thought that was just a cool picture because a lot of people around here say the Fouke Monster is orange looking like an orangutan, and that might be what the Fouke Monster looks like in a roundabout way. And people say, well, what color are Bigfoot? They got to be black. You can't be a different colored black, you know, black, brown, orange. The one I saw was gray. But look at the differences in the colors of orangutans. They have a variation in hair color, and they're not all bright orange. Same thing with wolves. You have all the spectrum of colors of fur and eyes, and you never know. One species doesn't have to be necessarily the same color. So, here's the sound Charles and I played in Black Bayou, and then we're gonna, and this is the same sound I heard in Mercer Bayou. So that's not a Bigfoot. That sound was created in a sound studio just to fake people out, you know what I'm saying? But people around Fouke and a lot of my travels say these animals mimic whatever they hear if they're interested. So this animal was mimicking what we were playing, thinking maybe it was one of its own kind. My friend Smokey Crabtree, R.I.P., he said when he started investigating, his son had shot at one, and him and some buddies went out a few nights later to try to find the monster, and they were sitting around a campfire, and they heard a big animal coming up near the campfire, so they just held, you know, kept their peace because they knew how to hunt and how to wait, and said as it come up close to the campfire, it sounded like a kitten. And there were no kittens out in the middle of the woods. So it started moving off, and it sounded like a dog that was hurt, kind of yelping. I said, well, I don't think any of our dogs followed us out here. Let's just hang in here and see what happens. Well, it moved off a little further, and it started making sounds like a horse or a cow. And they said, nobody's got any horses or cows around here. what the heck is this? And finally it moved further off into the swamp, and then they heard that sound you hear at the beginning of the movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek. So they realized this thing could mimic other animals. Now here's the sound from Area X, the Ouachita Mountains, the Comanche Mountains, that was recorded in 2017, and we compared this sound to a recording we recorded in 2006, and it was exactly the same sound. We have a man in the group, all he does for a living is investigates sounds of animals, records them, and works with them. And technology is advanced so far, he can go through a year's worth of vocalizations and figure out through a computer if it's a deer or a coyote or whatever. And he compared this sound to all the known North American species, and it wasn't a bird, it wasn't a coyote, he didn't know what it was. So this is the sound from the mountains, and the first sound you hear is tree frogs, but that's not it. You'll hear what we recorded. Tree frog. So I don't know what that was, and that looks very much like the animal I saw in 2017. I couldn't see its face that well, but I saw two huge green eyes as big as silver dollars, probably 4 to 6 inches apart. And the animal was about 2 or 3 feet lower than me in a low spot. So we were eye to eye. So you can figure out how tall it was. And there's an example of a spectrogram, the two sounds matched. So a little bit about my group. For years, we've been sending teams of 1 to 5 investigators. They have to commit to a week in this area. No electricity, no water, no cell phone, no internet. And they have good high-tech equipment because we've got a big group, nearly 100 now, and we have the money to spend on some good equipment. And the area where we research, and my friend Alton figured, from there all down to here and around is 47,523 square miles. Now that's a lot of land, that's a lot of habitat, and he's just talking about wooded area, not houses and towns. And the national forest we're at has 1.8 million acres. First monster quest, the first Fouke monster investigation I did, there was a deer hunter. He got in early before the sun come up. He got up in his tree stand. He was waiting. He heard something move up out of the Sulphur River bottoms, and it was making weird sounds. He said, well, that must be a cow or a big old hog. I don't know. That's weird sounds. Well, as it got closer and the sun started to come up a little bit, he could see it was a wood ape. And it was coming towards him, and he thought, oh, all I've got is a bow here. But the animal got right up underneath him, and he's standing there like this, and it reached up towards him. He was just about 15 feet or so off the ground, but it started reaching, trying to touch his boot, and as it did that, it hit the broad head of his arrow, which is razor sharp. So it screamed real loud and took off back to the sulfur bottom. So that was fun. That was my very first investigation. And here's the guy near where he had his, Stacy Hudson, and he's in the Boggy Creek Monster DVD made by our friend Seth Breedlove. So he's got a pretty good story. Second one was a coon hunter that saw one in Mercer Bayou, and this is where we go. It's just a hot spot where everybody goes to investigate these animals. And rather than me telling the story, I'm going to let Lyle tell the story.
So we're sitting here at Mercer Bayou near Fountain, Arkansas. This is the very same place that a coon hunter had a sighting years ago. And in that instance, he let his coon dogs go, and they came upon something that was totally unexpected. One was a huge 7-foot-tall hairy creature. And he said the thing just menacingly reached down, scooped up some water, and he splashed on it. And of course, it scared him to death. He came running out of here. He never wanted to get back to the woods. And investigators came to look at this and we tell him what the spot. I think
Now this is Jonesville, Sulphur River, Mercer Bayou. Kind of gives you an idea of where the hot spots are, and this is where we're at down in Mercer Bayou.
So we're sitting here at Mercer Bayou near Fouke, Arkansas, and this is the very same place that a coon hunter had a sighting years ago. And in that instance, he let his coon dogs go, and they came upon something that was totally unexpected. It was a huge 7-foot-tall hairy creature, and he said the thing just looked at him menacingly, reached down, scooped up some water, and splashed on it. And of course, it scared him to death. He came running out of here, and he never wanted to go back in these woods. Even when investigators came to look at this, he would only tell them roughly where the spot is. He would not take him down there. It traumatized him so bad, never went to coon hunting again. Here tonight, you can hear some dogs in the distance. This is just like that night when the coon hunter encountered the Fouke Monster here in Mercer Bayou.
And I recorded that with that little camera I showed you earlier, so they worked pretty good. But I think this is what the guy saw. I think this is exactly what he saw. And I can't imagine, I would be traumatized if I was out in the middle of a swamp and I saw an animal this big headed towards me being aggressive. So there's a lot more to the story. We were the investigators that followed up the NAWAC, and the guy took us out there, and we were on a rocky road, and he got out and he said, down in there in those bottoms is where I saw it, but I'm not going down in there. As a matter of fact, it's getting dark and I'm about to leave. If you guys want to go spend the night down in there, go ahead, but I'm done and I'm about to leave, so good luck. So he was done with it. One night we did an investigation. Some friends of mine and I woke up about 2 in the morning and started playing vocalizations again. The same one I played earlier. Like, ah, whoop, 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 whoop. We played that. And we were supposed to just do it once. We were in the VFRO at the time, and the protocol was to play it once, wait 15 minutes, play it again, wait an hour, play it, wait 15 minutes, play it again, and wait an hour. And I kept hearing it twice. They were up on this hill where the coon hunter talked about, you know, you can go down in there. And I was at the boat ramp at the parking lot, and I thought they were playing the sound twice, because they were just supposed to play it once. And the guy came down that was sitting on this spot right here, and he said, man, are you hearing all this? I said, yeah, why are they playing it twice? He said, they're not playing it twice. That other sound's coming from the swamp. And I got to thinking, my gosh, I thought it was an echo or something. But they're up on this hill, and the second sound is coming from this swampy area. And just for miles and miles, there's nothing. And it just so happens the sound was coming from where the deer hunter was sitting in his tree stand. So we heard that, and he said, this guy was sitting in the truck, and he said, I was sitting in the truck, the batteries and my equipment all died, and there was something walking around in this water, obviously trying to make sounds, just sloshing water, breaking limbs, didn't really growl or anything, but finally it threw a rock at me, and that was about all I could take, so I come down here to sit with you. But you know, all we could determine is either somebody hoaxing us out in the middle of the swamp at 3 o'clock in the morning, or it was some unknown animal, or it was some known animal that was making a sound that we didn't know it made. So, interesting stuff. I'm nearly through, thank goodness. The last part is about cane. From the border of Kansas all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, I've done an investigation and asked people, where did you see this creature? And they said it was on Cane Creek, over and over and over. And I thought, well, there's a pattern here of why Caney Creek. So I looked it up, and they said when river cane starts to grow, you can eat the shoots. And then as it grows bigger and bigger, a lot of animals use cane, you know, to hide in. We call them cane breaks down here in the South. So I got to looking more, and we think these animals are Gigantopithecus. It was a genus of apes that existed perhaps 9 million years ago, maybe as recently as 100,000 years ago. And their teeth and jawbone have been found in China, Vietnam, and India. Theoretically, they lived in bamboo forests with the giant panda, which is extinct. So it was eating bamboo, which is part of the same family as cane. The features of the teeth and jaws suggest that the animals adapt to chewing tough fibrous food by cutting, crushing, and grinding it. And that's from Wikipedia. And I asked my friend Alton, I said, man, there's nothing up in these mountains for it to eat. He said, look on the ground, Jerry, what do you see? I see acorn. He said, yeah. He said, there's a million, trillion, zillion tons of acorns here. Every kind of nut you can think of. In the summer, there's blackberries. There's all kinds of deer and other things to eat. Oh yeah, there's plenty of food here because their jaw is adapt at chewing tough fiber stuff. And then finally, the DVD, Boggy Creek Monster, the truth behind the legend, a film crew went out to this lake and they were doing their filming. When they finished, they heard a vocalization coming from the north part of the lake. And they thought, that's weird. And I've been out there and I've heard a weird vocalization from that part of the lake. And I thought it was weird. So we went there about 3 years ago, some buddies, and we said, let's go look at the north end of or the south end of the lake and see what's there. And there was this huge cane break, just as far as you could see, nothing but cane. And there were trails, you know, going all in between it because hogs and mountain lions and things like that hide in it. But that strange that these sounds come from a huge cane break. So scientifically, if we wrap it all up, we say we've got sightings from north of Dallas on the Sulphur River all the way to Fouke. We have possibly things they can eat. We have sightings by the hundreds. And if we do it right and we do it scientifically, maybe we can prove they exist someday, because I don't want anybody to come in here and develop this area. I heard a few years ago there was actually a guy saying he wanted to develop part of Mercer Bayou and put in apartments, and it never worked, and I don't see how you could ever put any type of thing to live in Mercer Bayou, but that's what I heard. And I would hate to see this area ruin, all of this beautiful wildlife and plants destroyed for apartments. And you never know, if you're out in the canoe, you might find something cool. So it's not just monster hunting, it's just having a beautiful day out on the bayou, paddling around and having a good time. So in summary, what do we have? Dozens of reports from witnesses at creeks, from all these rivers, trackways and plaster casts, which I didn't have time to talk about, but I have some on my table. Similarities in names and locations spanning across hundreds of miles of southern bottomlands. Have you had an experience? So, does anybody in here think they might have had, and don't be bashful, think they might have had an encounter with one of things? Well, that's cool. That's very cool. So, that's about all I got today. Be sure and drop by and say hello. If you got any questions, let me know. I think that's about it. So, I sure am glad to be in Fouke today, and I hope you are too. And stick around for the rest of the day. We got a lot of good stuff coming your way. So thank you very much for your attention. Have a good day.